Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. I'm Brian Parks, and in this video I want to start talking about some of the specific vulnerabilities that we detected in yesterday's video. So yesterday, if you haven't seen the video, go ahead and check it out. I'll leave a link down in the description below. We used the Z attack proxy, or ZA proxy, um, which is a free open source pen testing tool, security scanning tool. And we ran it against Glassminnow to see what was up, what the current security posture of the application was. Short answer, pretty bad. And there were a few specific vulnerabilities that I wanted to call out the rest of this week. The biggest one, and quite honestly, I don't know how I didn't see it because I was looking for it in the video. I said I don't know I don't know why I'm not seeing any cross-site scripting. The reason is because I was looking for XSS, the common abbreviation. Cross is abbreviated as X, and then site scripting, so cross-site scripting. But it was the top 3 vulnerabilities. And you know what, now that I think about it, I don't remember if that was because I was kind of in the middle of a scan, so maybe it just hadn't detected some of the cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. I had seen them. I had seen the results of them as I was trying to explore the application. I kept getting pop-ups that were clearly the result of its cross-site scripting testing. But maybe they just hadn't gone into the results yet. But the top 3 vulnerabilities are 3 different variations of cross-site scripting. And I forget exactly why they divided it into 3 variations, because I typically divide it into 2 variations. There's one that's reflected, and then there's one that's persisted. I think the other one was what they call DOM-based, which is kind of a variation on those 2. But in general, reflected. Well, let's take a step back and talk about what cross-site scripting is. Cross-site scripting is basically injecting JavaScript into the HTML of your page that's not supposed to be there. The way that it is typically introduced is by a malicious actor pushing some sort of script text into either a query string parameter, then making that link available on the web for people to click, or by putting it into a form field. And depending on the variation, you can end up with, as I've said, reflected or persistent cross-site scripting. Reflected is cross-site scripting that is basically reflected to the user. So it's typically in the query string parameter case where script goes in to the request as part of that query string parameter, and then it comes back in the response. It's reflected back to the user. Typically in tests like this, the script is something fairly innocuous, like it pops up an alert box and it pops up a pop-up. But typically in a realistic attack scenario, that can be used for things like session hijacking. So it might be used in combination with some of what we'll talk about tomorrow with cookies, where it'll actually pull the cookies from the page and send those off to some other website. Some website controlled by the attacker, so they can collect information. In some cases, it might be used to collect other information about the website, scrape the web page, or it might be sufficient to basically get some information about the logged in user, right? Because let's say you go to a web page and it automatically logs you in because you've been there before. If this script is running on the page, now this script can get some information about you, the currently logged in user. Maybe not your session details, but maybe, let's talk about a bank website or a tax website or something like that, where social security numbers, financial information, bank account numbers, those sorts of things might be displayed fairly prominently on a web page. And if it's vulnerable to cross-site scripting, that information can get sucked out and sent off to a website controlled by the attacker. So that's reflected. It's usually kind of a first stage attack intended to get information. The second type of cross-site scripting vulnerability is persistent or stored cross-site scripting. And what happens here is maybe there's a reflected component too, but the end goal of the cross-site scripting part of the attack is that the script gets stored in the database. So not only is this visible to the user that was initially affected, and maybe there is no user that's initially affected, it could just be someone leaving a comment, the attacker leaving a comment on a blog post or something like that. But because it's stored in the database, other users on the application, potentially everybody who uses that application, will be impacted by it, because when they visit that page, the script, which is stored in the database, will run on the page and do whatever. Now, it can still be used to collect information. It could be used to collect login information, login cookies, that sort of thing, authentication tokens. It could be used to scrape the web page and get more information. But typically the stored cross-site scripting vulnerabilities are a little bit more insidious, because they can, depending on how that information is used, like let's say somehow it populates a user profile. Well, now your user profile is probably going to show up on pretty much every page, because most applications have some sort of avatar in the top right corner or top left corner, somewhere on the page. So it's possible that that script could run on every single page, and an attacker could collect a lot of information about your session, potentially as a base for a social engineering sort of thing, right? Somehow it might prompt you to go change your security questions, and now it knows the answers to your security questions, or anything like that. Moral of the story: cross-site scripting, bad news. Again, typically used as a first step in an attack. Usually, cross-site scripting is used as a way to gather information, but it could be used as a way to initiate actions on the user's behalf, potentially coupled with some other vulnerabilities like cross-site request forgery. So if a cross-site scripting vulnerability is used to collect session details, it could then be used to impersonate a user and then initiate some requests. Maybe if your bank website is vulnerable, for instance, it might transfer some money to someone else's account or something like that, all behind the scenes, something like that. I don't say this to frighten you. Your bank account website is most likely safe, because financial institutions do run security tests like this against their websites, because they are in a highly regulated industry, and because they are the details that they have within their systems are so sensitive. But that doesn't mean that just because you don't deal with sensitive details like that, you shouldn't also be doing penetration testing, security scanning. No website is too small. In some cases, attackers will actually go after the smaller websites, because they're less likely to have the budgets to do a sophisticated security scanning. But as we've discovered, you can spend absolutely no money and still run a security scan. ZA Proxy, totally free, open source, really good tool. I'm impressed with what it's found. I did a little bit of exploratory testing and then ran an automated scan, ran it overnight. It found a lot of stuff that I'm absolutely going to be going through and fixing on Glassminnow to make it truly ready for prime time. So that's cross-site scripting in a nutshell. If you like this video, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you have questions about cross-site scripting, or how it might affect you, go ahead and leave a comment down below. You can also check out the OWASP, that's OWASP website, owasp.org. That's the Open Web Application Security Project. They have a really good write-up on lots of different security vulnerabilities, including cross-site scripting. And of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell, so you'll be notified when the next video gets released, which will be tomorrow, where we'll talk about unsafe, insecure cookies. I hope to see you there, but until next time, have a great day.